All right. Hello, everybody. This is Catherine Barnes, and I am so excited today to have on the show Mr. Matt Denney, who has a show at Tucson Fringe. I believe it's a solo show, yes?
Yes, it is.
Is this your first solo show?
This is my very first solo show. I started writing it last year, and this is going to be the final, quote unquote, final product of my writing over the past year.
Wow. Remind me of the title.
And so the title of my show is Matt-chong, a Swagapino Search for Identity. It's a long title, but I sometimes just refer to it as Matt-chong, and then Swagapino Search for Identity is mainly for marketing purposes, a little bit about the show, like a little sneak peek, a little some.
So I had to Google Swagapino and I looked on Urban Dictionary and there were a bunch of different definitions. So enlighten us. What is a Swagapino?
And so a Swagapino is very much like it's very much Filipino in middle school and high school. And so it's someone who identifies as Filipino, but someone who has a little bit of more extra swag, a little bit of more pep in their step. Or as I like to say in my show, I say swag, it really means something we all got is what swag realistically means. And so Filipinos sort of I exemplify that in middle and high school. And I myself in high school was a Swagapino, someone who dressed like all my other friends and someone who was like that. But again, I identify as mixed race, Filipino and American. And so learning the balance between that is part of the show. But that's roughly what a Swagapino is. It's something we all got who identifies as Filipino.
I love it. That's beautiful. So why did you decide to write a solo show?
And so the main reason why I decided to write a solo show was, again, a lot of my work is based in identity and based in how do we find identity, what makes us what we are, and how do we reflect on that. I like to say this show, how it's sort of structured is, imagine I'm your friend at a bar and I won't be quiet about my life story. This is what that show is. I just won't be quiet. I tell you everything and anything you want to know. With structure, of course. But again, the reason why I wanted to write a solo show is because I started really thinking back about, I'm mixed race, I'm Filipino, and I'm white, I'm Irish. And so I was raised Filipino, but I also spent a lot of time with what I call my white side of the family, growing up at different holidays and having to code switch. And looking back on the stories they told me growing up, it was a little bit of this and a little bit of this, making me who I was. And because I never really felt I was a part of either identity group, because I was just sort of somewhere stuck in the middle. And so I take it from the lens of my grandma's told me stories all the time growing up. And the main quote from the reason why I wrote this show, the main quote is, growing up, we believe everything our family tells us until someone says it's false. So someone says it's a lie, which is very true. And something that I grew up learning was through their stories of the culture and where we come from, but also a little bit about the family dynamic and why you should have family and why family is so important.
So I'm curious to know Filipino and Irish. So there were obviously lots of differences, right? Were there any similarities in the two sides of the family and the two cultures?
They're both very large families. I will say that straight out the gate is just on my mom's side I'm originally from Las Vegas, and so on my mom's side, literally there's I'm talking hundreds of cousins. Like around Las Vegas area, but a smaller group of about 20 of us. And then on my white side is like they're from Las Vegas and they're from Texas, like it's really small town in Texas. And I have about 30-ish cousins, and then on that side. And so our family gatherings were always very large. And I grew up knowing, oh, do you remember this person? And me playing the game like, oh yeah, uncle something or aunt something. And so all of these families were very large. And so that was one of the similarities that you get to see is my grandmas tend to be very similar as well in their storytelling techniques and how they raised me. Is I feel like I have grandmas who are very, very loving and love to tell stories, but also believe that they're right in everything that they say. And if you disagree, then you're wrong. For some reason, it's like you can't disagree with grandma because you're probably wrong. I don't know where this comes from, but that was always like one of those things. And you get to meet my grandmas in this show, and they're both amazing, lovely people. But you get to hear about how we deal with big family issues and big challenges that have come up in our life relating to death, grief, loss, happiness, and pure joy and fulfillment. And it looks very different for both families, but also very much the same. About we all feel the same way. We just experience it all very differently, and we react to things very differently. And my grandma in the show talks about how each of the family members dealt with the loss of a family member, and it's very, very deep and eye-opening, but it's oddly nostalgic.
Hmm. Okay. So it sounds like this show is going to tackle some really big issues in a lot of different ways. Was it at all challenging to write about these kinds of issues, and how did you deal with those challenges?
Throughout my rehearsal process and the writing process, I cried a lot. I'm a crier. Every time I perform this show, I can't help but cry because of how beautifully nostalgic this is. Because it's so beautiful to have my memories that I have kept all of this time on paper and in my hands. I have the stories that a lot of my family members used to tell me. And I'm telling this beautiful audience that we can experience this all together. And so a lot of these topics are tough. And I mean, and so this show was originally written written at East West Players in Los Angeles, which is the premier Asian theater company. And so that's where this show had its sort of an impetus and start of 10 minutes. They got 9 artists together to write 10 short solo pieces. And then we've all sort of gone off and done our own things with them. And this is where I've got to do a full length portion of it, where I get to talk about more family members, talk about more stories, and all the different things that I've been told growing up. But I mean, with solo pieces, they're often very reflective of your mind and of your soul. And so when writing this, I feel like if I did not cry, if I did not feel something, it was not meant to be in the show because it wasn't quote unquote important enough in my mind. And so narrowing this down to only an hour show was very, very difficult because I loved a lot of these sections very deeply, and cutting a few of these felt like I was losing some of it. So I have a master list of scripts, and I have like the regular one that I'll be performing for the show. And in the show, I say I have the script in my hand for a reason. I say like this is the structure of the show. This is what we will talk about, but I will go off on random tangents randomly throughout the show and tell the audience about this whole thing about like, oh my gosh, my uncle Jim Bob went down this thing, and this thing. And so those stories are still present and they're there. They just may not be written directly into the show.
Oh, wow. So it sounds like there's almost not not exactly improvisation, but there's a little bit of your show. It sounds like that's maybe, it might be different every time, or it might be kind of off the cuff.
Mhm.
Oh, wow. That's exciting.
Yeah. Well, because the main reason for that was because, well, first of all, I hate memorizing lines. That's the first one. I hate memorizing lines, but also within that, I wanted to do a show that was directly me, not what I thought a show was supposed to be.
Mm.
I wanted to meet expectations by all means of how amazing this show can be, but also like with this show, I wanted to have it be me. And I come from a teaching background. I'm a teacher. So I'm always constantly working to make something that is what I feel is home to me. And that's talking in front of an audience, teaching about stories and theater and art and all of that amazing stuff, ideally. And so when I have the script in my hand and I take the audience on a journey for about an hour, I have an alarm clock in the front row that audience will be keeping for me. So I can see the time about like, am I like 20 minutes until we end the show, or am I 10 minutes before we end the show? I did that very intensely because I need to keep track of myself and my time.
I like that, the alarm clock. I think that would be helpful for a lot of solo artists to have, kind of like a TED Talk, how they have that big red clock. That's a really good
Yes,
idea.
exactly.
So you mentioned you're a teacher, and I was going to ask you, did you have a lot of theater experience before you did this, or is this like your first time getting into theater, or tell us about that?
And so when I was teaching, I taught theater. I had my degree in education and theater education. And so theater has always been a part of my life. Did it all throughout elementary, middle school, high school. I was very blessed to be born and raised in Las Vegas, where there is that opportunity. And I got my first professional gig in high school. And so I was thankfully given those opportunities. And so theater has been always been a part of my life. But now I feel like instead of the quote unquote like traditional theater where you do the play, you do this thing, I'm more interested in the educational side of it and what it does to the people that are involved. Where it's just like let's talk about identity, let's self-reflect, and let's think about how our stories have molded us to this thing, and then let's perform in front of another group so that these stories don't die. I'm more interested in that versus a quote unquote like traditional theater experience because I wanted to continue my education. I currently work at University of Arizona, and I applied for a master or for a PhD program. Like I want to continue doing the work that is meaningful to me, not what I believe is not what others believe is meaningful to me. So it all happens internally for me,
Hmm.
and so my theater experience is more focused on the artists involved and their experience versus the actual final product itself.
Hmm. Very interesting. Okay. So I see you have your University of Arizona Hawaiian shirt on, which is
Yes.
excellent. I love it. Would you say that in your work there, that like your own exploration of your identity helps you in your interactions with the students? Because they're at the age where that's like all they're thinking about, right? They're really trying to find out who they are.
Mhm. And that's one of the reasons why I love this job. And so I work in housing, and my role is a community director. So I supervise the building, the students that are inside, the staff, everyone who is a part of this building. I directly have interaction with or supervise. And so it really is building a community that I'm proud of. Of a community of inclusivity where you can experience and have these conversations with someone. And so even just like before when I mentioned like before they left for winter break, we had this huge thing where we talked about all the winter holidays that are celebrated in December and January, and many students didn't have the opportunity to speak on these topics beforehand because we at my hall have a lot of international students having a lot of international students that come in and experience the university, and my staff wants to be part of it, and so we have those cultural conversations with them about cultural competency, and a lot of it is framed by having those moments and me leading them and me leading my staff in those moments too, of really diving deep about what makes a college experience good and what makes a person feel welcomed and fulfilled.
Hmm. Hmm. Wow. No, that's it. That's very, very interesting. Another thing that I wanted to ask you about your show, I kind of want to come back to this. We'll bookmark this thing
Yes.
about like what makes the college experience good, because I have more that I want to ask you about that. But you posted an article a few days ago where you wrote about your dad and that your dad was a police officer. And there was this really super funny, cute, adorable picture of like your dad and you and your mom, and everyone's making like a completely different face. And it was so cute.
Yes.
And I read this article and it was so fascinating to me because so in my house growing up, I will confess, my mom is a public defender. So in
Mhm.
my house growing up, the police were the bad guys. And like, we got all the talks about like, when you get pulled over, this is what you do. And, all those kinds of things, which you might not expect in a household for someone who looks like me, but we got those discussions. And I read your article and I went, oh my God, the police are people and they have
Mhm.
families. And that was so
Mhm.
interesting. So are you going to talk at all in your show about what it was like being the son of a cop?
It is to a degree, but also it's not that in my mom and dad have a section in the show I have where I talk about how they met, where they grew up, and everything like that. But I mean, realistically, my dad is a man's man. He enlisted in the military at 18, and then he went to Hawaii where he was based off of, and he says, oh my goodness, it was so hard in Hawaii. Reality, he talks about, yeah, I went to the beach every day, went to go visit the mountains, went to do this thing, and then when I was born, he started working at Southwest, lugging baggage, lugging baggage everywhere, and then he became a police officer. And so I was like, literally all like the quote unquote like manliest jobs that you can fathom. My dad has done, or male dominated jobs. My dad has probably done it before. And so it's very interesting. That article was written, I think, in 2015. And granted, my experience has changed a little bit due to the nature of what's going on in the world. But realistically, and I have a conversation with my dad about it, and he totally understood for it, and he totally understood what I was going for it. But no, I always constantly worried about my dad and him as a police officer, because again, he's lost many friends. I've lost people who I knew, who associated with my dad. They're now gone because of violence and cruelty that is being done to them. And so when realizing that there are people, and that like my dad, I knew he would be home at 5 every day. Like that's what I grew up knowing. But there's always that little instinct of just like, what if he doesn't come back? What if he's in the hospital? What if he doesn't do this thing? Because he has a very tough job, and very violent job when it comes down to it, whichever end. But and the reason why that came up is because my dad recently retired, and he cried because he said, I'm happy I made it with 10 fingers and 10 toes. And I was like, just that alone, oh my God. When he said that, he started to cry, and I've never seen my dad cry before, like in a million years. And so it's very interesting that he's actually done that, and he can recognize, lost a lot of friends, but I'm happy to be here. And he will be at my show this weekend,
Oh,
which is
wow.
which is a big blessing.
That's awesome. And you
Yeah.
mentioned having the big families. So
Yes.
are you thinking you're going to have a big audience at your show?
I will say a lot of them are coming and have decided to come, and are and gracefully are vaccinated and boosted and have tested and have taken many negative tests. And so thankfully a lot of them will be here, including one of my grandmas will be there, my dad, my mom, her partner, and a few other amazing family members, but also a lot of the family that I met here in Tucson. Uh, because again, when I moved here 7 months ago. I
Oh,
didn't know
recently.
anybody. Yeah. I didn't know anybody. And yet here I got involved with theater company, and my coworkers are coming, people who want to support me are coming. And so it's going to be a very real, ethereal experience this upcoming weekend, being in a room full of community members and family that I was born with, and that I have grown to think of as family.
That's awesome. And so,
Yeah.
you know, you talked about your role at the U of A and in, making the college experience good and making people feel included. And I was wondering, do you have any advice that you would give to anybody who's working in an educational capacity like I do? I'm a teacher too, or even in a business capacity for what can we do to be more inclusive?
I think to be more inclusive, I think asking yourself, there's this beautiful, I'm getting more in my higher education, like master's degree world right for a second, but there's this beautiful theorist called Gene Finney. Gene Finney has 3 models of ethnic identity development. The first one is acknowledging, the first stage is acknowledging, okay, I'm a person, that is all. I'm a person, that is all, and I have identities about me, do with it what you will. The second phase is okay, I have these identities about me. What how do I play a part, like how do those identities change the way I interact in certain spaces? Such as like if you're a person of color walking into a room where there's no one who looks like you or acts, or quote unquote acts like you. And then the third phase is the hardest one to achieve, but it's constant engagement with your identities and the challenging of those identities. Something to think about is, and I ask my staff this all the time, is when's the last time you went to a cultural event or something you didn't know anything about? When's the last time you have gained that cultural competency? Or when's the last time you reflected about your childhood experience and what made you you? We just recently did identity boards, and we had a very deep discussion about, you haven't thought about these in a very long time, but they make you you. And we're all very different. So how are we all different, and how can we use what we know and what we are to further inform our work and further inform everything that we do? because with identity, diversity, equity, inclusion, with especially with professionals, constant engagement with those students and conversations with not only with the students but also university events as well is how do you believe that students we always say students should engage with the learning, engage with the classroom, engage with this thing. How are we asking them to engage with us when we don't engage with them? We
Hmm.
don't engage with them. I constantly go to university events because I have the time and I have the ability to do that. But when's the last time I supported a student going to their art event and going to their professional thing, or going to watch like their badminton game or something like that? When have I gone to a university game, a basketball game? You know, it's very telling when a professor or when a teacher is not engaged with the community of the school or the university that they're in, because there's like that space where it's like you know what's going on but you also don't know what's going on. And with my students that I help mentor and everything, we talk about university stuff all the time and ask them, okay, when's that thing? Let me know how I can support you in that. And just that little tidbit conversation alone changes the whole dynamic of the room about like, oh, you're not just like you just don't want to hear just because you're trying to make conversation. You actually want to go like for real. And so when I was teaching, I constantly went to students events. I started a teacher Instagram, is that like they can keep up to date on some of the more like accomplishment things I'm doing. Had conversations about stuff that was going on in the field. Like when I was teaching theater, when I was teaching theater, I started my high school teacher Instagram thing, and I had a conversation on there because there was a lot of talk about cutting the arts at the school that I was at. And so, because they said that people weren't doing enough in the arts, or like it's a fun class, it's not really needed. And so I posted my lesson plans, and I posted my lesson plans, and they're about 7 pages long with all core curriculum content things. And I said, like, I am taught the same way that you all are taught, and so this should not be even a conversation. And my principal got to see that, and then he asked to see them, and then he brought them to school board meetings that they were at, and they're awesome advocates out there for the arts. You just need to put yourself out there and see who's going to support when time is needed.
Huh. Wow, that's really awesome that you used Instagram
Mhm.
to advocate for yourself and for your class as a teacher. That's really, really fabulous. Is there anything in your show about being a teacher, about that aspect of your identity?
And so realistically, I start off with that, but the main premise of the story is based in family. I want to write another solo show already. I'm not even finished with this one yet, but I want to write another one about there's this beautiful article about or activity that I used to do that's called "If My Teacher Knew," and it's all anonymous, but you give them to your students at the very beginning of the year, and it's all about I wish my teacher knew blank about me, knew that I blank, and it's very eye opening all the different things that students are dealing with, because they are dealing with a lot. It's not we're in 2022. It's not too early 2000s where we're like that's where I went to school, where we just sat down, listened to the teacher, we went home, and that was the end of the conversation. Now, there's students see teachers more than they see more than some of them see their parents. We're essentially parenting these students for an hour and a half, an hour a day, and they get accustomed to us. We build a relationship with them, and it continues to grow. I haven't taught in my high and I haven't taught in the high school level for about 4 years now, and I still have students asking me for recommendations, talking to me, and everything like that. Even on my TikTok, I found all these old letters that they had written me, and a lot of them responded to it saying that, "Oh my goodness, Mr. Denny, like I miss you. I wish that you would have, I wish you would have been here for this thing." And we, the teachers and people in the education teaching realm, they make a difference. And by harnessing the impact of that impact that they have, I believe is open to so many other opportunities and areas of growth for these students that we're teaching. Is if we have a conversation with them, if we don't take ourselves too seriously for 30 minutes and just have a general conversation with the students, that can change the impact of the relationship entirely. if they know that they can trust that professor and that they're going to be real with them, or that teacher, and they can be real with them, and they're really looking out for them, it changes the whole dynamic.
So are any of your students coming to your show?
Yeah. So my staff is coming to my show. My staff that I currently supervise is coming to the show. And so throughout my time here, I've supervised two staffs within 7 months. And so one staff is Historic Lane, and then the other staff where I currently work is Babcock. And they, as far as they've told me, they're all coming to my show. And I think so far about 10 to 15 students will be in attendance. I think they're coming on Sunday, but yes. Yes, they will be there. And again, I asked for their support, and they want to uplift the work that I do. And I've taught them well. I've taught them well that they support other artists and the arts in the community, because they really do mean something.
Awesome. So you mentioned TikTok. If people want to follow you on social media, or if they want to find you outside of this interview, where can they find you?
So everything is at the Matt Denney. Denney is my last name, and so at the Matt Denney, everything. Don't worry, I'm branded, and so it's everywhere: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Anything you want to find me on, you can find me there.
Awesome. And when your shows are happening in person in Tucson, can you give that information in case folks want to see it?
Yes, definitely. And so my location is the Screening Room, which is in downtown Tucson, and I perform from 8:30 to 9:30 on Saturday night, and then 1:30 to 2:30 Sunday matinee-ish time, Sunday afternoon time. And that is let me pull up the calendar so I make sure I give the right dates real quick. It is, and so Saturday the 15th, 8:30, and then Sunday the 16th at 1:30 at the Screening Room in Tucson.
Fabulous. And the title one more time, because it's a beautiful title.
It is Matt-chong, a Swagapino search for identity. Very
Awesome.
true.
I love it. Well, hey, thank you so much for hanging out with me today, Matt. It's been a pleasure, and break a leg with both of your awesome shows.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Best of luck to you too as well.
Thank you.